Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Thursday, June 26th. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Coming up, a new study from UC Merced is forecasting massive impacts to California over mass deportations.
What it means is a massive amount of people being apprehended from local communities.
And it comes with a big price tag. Our conversation with the researcher behind the study in just a few minutes. But first, these headlines. The federal government alleges California violated a civil rights law last month. That's when it allowed a transgender female athlete to compete in the state track and field championship in Clovis. High schooler A.B. Hernandez won 3 medals, but the federal education department proposes that she be stripped of those medals. It also proposes that California ban all trans female athletes from women's sports. The state has 10 days to respond to the notice, or it could face legal consequences. A proposed Kern County immigration detention facility is drawing concern from a local civil rights group. KVPR's Carrie Klein reports on the developments in California City.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement is considering reopening shuttered prisons to house detained migrants. One of those facilities is a state prison in California City, which was closed last year. The nonprofit Dolores Huerta Foundation this week penned a letter urging the City Council of California City to not allow this to happen. The group asked city leaders to not, quote, be complicit in a system built on incarceration, dehumanization, and profit from suffering. The letter also called out private prison operators for not bringing promised economic prosperity to their surrounding communities. The California City Prison is among 9 that immigration officials are reportedly considering reopening. Another Valley facility being considered is in McFarland. For KVPR News, I'm Carrie Klein.
California's largest utility provider, Pacific Gas and Electric, has hired bodyguards to protect its CEO twice in the last 3 months. That's according to new reporting from our California newsroom partner, CalMatters. Melina Carollo has more.
CalMatters found out PG&E was hiring security through the company's job postings on LinkedIn. Combat shooting expertise is a requirement for anyone who applies. But representatives for the utility would not answer questions about whether hiring bodyguards is a response to targeted threats. They also wouldn't say how much the utility is spending on this protection, or whether shareholders or customers are footing the bill for the bodyguards. PG&E said it always had security for its executives, and it's a standard industry practice. California's next largest utility company, Southern California Edison, also confirmed to CalMatters that it provides executive security.
Local congressmen from both sides of the aisle are urging the federal government to continue developing a bird flu vaccine for cattle. Congressmen Jim Costa, David Valadao, Josh Harder, Vince Vaughn, and Adam Gray all co-signed a letter reminding the USDA secretary that the virus continues to pose a threat to the U.S.'s food supply. Bird flu has resulted in the deaths of tens of millions of birds and has infected the majority of California's herds of dairy cattle. A battle is brewing over Kern County water that is supplied to a Stanislaus County community. Our partner newsroom, SJV Water, reports that the Kern County Water Agency might cut off the only water source to a luxury development known as Diablo Grande. That's if Diablo Grande residents do not agree to a 200% increase in water rates. The increase stems from the remote nature of the community and the water agency's rising debt. A bill making its way through the legislature may help support bees, specifically managed honeybees, which are threatened by mites. The bill would create a managed honeybee health program that would provide grants to beekeepers and farmers. Our California newsroom partner CalMatters reports the bill has no formal opposition in the legislature, but it could be a tough sell with lawmakers grappling with a $12 billion budget shortfall.
Support for Central Valley Daily comes from the members of KVPR. Join at $8 or more per month and access ad-free NPR podcasts through NPR Plus. Give now at kvpr.org/donate.
And now to our main story. the Trump administration has been ramping up mass deportations of people without legal status. At the start of the year, one of the first immigration enforcement raids hit Kern County. It came in the last weeks of the Biden administration and just as President Trump was set to take office. In the months that followed the new administration, thousands of people have been detained and deported. Many of these arrests have been controversial, and the Trump administration has been taken to court to challenge the operations. From deportation of migrants to a notorious prison in El Salvador and the detainment of even U.S. citizens, the mass deportation campaign seems to be continuing. And the protests against these government efforts have also grown louder. Meanwhile, the Trump administration has sent mixed signals on how it plans to move forward. Just weeks ago, the Trump administration flip-flopped on whether immigration agents should conduct raids on farms, hotels, and restaurants. And all of this bears the question, what economic impact will mass deportations have on the country? A new study looked at how this will look in California, specifically if deportations grow from what we've already seen. The findings show the impact could be in the billions. Maria Elena Young is a UC Merced researcher who conducted this impact study with the Bay Area Council Economic Institute. She recently spoke with KVPR's Rachel Livenall to break down how the study was conducted. Young starts off the conversation by explaining the research process.
So the interviews involved using qualitative research methods to have extensive, really mostly open-ended conversations with people who are on the ground right now, sort of trying to figure out, what does the future for their business look like? How do you keep providing services and encouraging immigrant youth to come to school? And so my team, who are all trained in qualitative methods, sort of sat down on Zoom and had these extensive conversations with folks on the ground. And then we used transcripts from those interviews to really look at what are the major themes across across different voices across the state. And then in the economic analysis, we used a whole source of different, primarily publicly available government data, the American Community Survey, which is with the from the Census, Bureau of Labor Statistics, to be able to conduct these estimates that we have in the report.
The big pinpoint here is that your report calculates that the California economy would lose $275 billion if mass deportations were to occur. So what would need to happen for this to become a reality?
Yeah, so this is a big number. It's a very concerning number. And what we found was that undocumented immigrants are just deeply rooted in all aspects of our economy. So they are workers, they are business owners, they are taxpayers, they're consumers. And so in the aggregate, all of these different aspects of how they are active in their day-to-day lives and in our economy together comes up to be $275 billion in GDP. So just looking at undocumented immigrants as workers, they make up 8% of the state's workforce. And this is even larger in certain sectors. So in agriculture, which is obviously very big here in the Central Valley, almost 2/3 of all workers in ag are immigrants themselves, and about a quarter are estimated to be undocumented based on our analyses. But this is also really high in sectors such as construction, where 40% of workers are themselves immigrants. And so these are sectors that, should there be increased immigration enforcement at work sites or even just in local communities where then people feel nervous about going to work, they would have immediate and serious implications on their ability to, get crops harvested on time, to continue building housing, which is so critical here in this region.
Yeah, can you kind of define for me what increased immigration enforcement would look like, or mass deportation?
Yeah, so this was actually one of the topics that we talked about in the stakeholder interviews. It's a term that has become part of common usage, but it's actually a somewhat new term, and it's not very clearly defined. What it means is a massive amount of people being apprehended from local communities, being held in detention centers, and potentially removed from the country. How that actually happens, though, is really unclear, I think, to all of us. And one of the things that came out from the stakeholder interviews is that from what people have previously observed in terms of immigration enforcement and what was already starting to happen in the months that we were doing the interviews, is that enforcement takes a lot of different forms. And so it can be kind of community-wide raids like we saw in Bakersfield and Kern County in early January, where people were being picked up off the street, literally. It can also be what we might more traditionally think of as like worksite raids, where there's a large enforcement action where they come to a factory or a field. But it also can be arrests in communities, individuals who are, picked up at home, and then other immigrants without status who are in the home are also picked up. We're seeing now, this was not happening at the time of the interviews, but we're now seeing courthouse arrests. And so one of the things that came out from the findings that we put in the first chapter of the report is that mass deportation isn't going to be any one thing. It's actually going to be a whole series of different types of enforcement events all over the state, and what could be seemingly sort of small scale events, in one town to, or the next town the next day, cumulatively has these economic impacts.
Yeah, were you able to calculate specifically how the San Joaquin Valley could be potentially impacted by these mass deportations?
We didn't include analyses in the report with just region-specific pieces. We did look, it's not in the report, but we did look, we were curious about some of the GDP numbers, and the GDP contributed by undocumented immigrants in the San Joaquin Valley is disproportionately higher than compared to across the state. So for example, about 5% of state GDP comes from the wages and economic output of undocumented immigrants alone. Just them just going to work and producing, picking fruit or offering services is 5%. In the San Joaquin Valley, that's 6%. So we disproportionately are reliant on immigrant labor. Beyond that, we didn't get super far into it, and that those are analyses that we propose in the future directions, and I think it would be really helpful for our region to know.
So what's next for you and your team? Will you be researching more into this topic, or what are you looking at now?
The goal is for us to do a follow-up a year from when we conducted the interviews. So as we were talking with folks, one of the things we asked at the end of each interview, do we have your permission to reach out in a year? And while obviously mass deportations make headlines, this is something I think that's going to be with us for a while. And so one of my goals with this research is to be checking in with stakeholders regularly, so beginning of next year in 2026, maybe even the following year, so we can really see over time what those harms look like in this region and across the state.
That was UC Merced researcher Maria Elena Young speaking with KVPR's Rachel Livenall. Young recently released a study looking at the potential economic impacts of mass deportations in California. And that's today's show. Today's episode was produced by Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
Planet Money helps you understand the economy. We find the people at the center of the story.
Garbage in New York, that was like a controlled substance.
We show you how money influences everything.
Tell me what you like by telling me how you spend your money.
And we dig until we get answers.
I had a bad feeling you were going to bring that up.
Planet Money finds out. All you have to do is listen. The Planet Money Podcast from NPR.